All right, welcome everybody to Frank Analysis. I am your host Franco, joined today by Israel S. Daly, host of Big Talk, Little Talk. How are you doing today, Israel?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk to you about the pros and cons of the Young Turks. We talked about
Yes.
the pros and cons about the Hill's Rising a couple of weeks ago. I thought that was a great discussion. I thought we could also do that about the Young Turks because there are some good things about the Young Turks, which we'll get into, but there's also some bad things that need to be addressed, and we're going to try to be objective here. And just a disclaimer for everyone, we're not telling you whether to stop watching the Young Turks. We're just giving you guys the stuff that we see, and some of this stuff is going to be true, and that's just stuff that you got to keep in mind. So I remember before I started here on YouTube, I would watch a lot of Israel's videos, and he would call out the Young Turks a lot during the primaries, back when Tulsi Gabbard was still in the race and Andrew Yang. So I want to start with you, Israel, since you gave them a lot of criticism. I want to hear some of the positives that you see in the Young Turks. So what are those?
Well, look, I think that it turned a lot of people just before the 2016 campaign, before Bernie's movement, a lot of lefties were kind of dormant. That movement was kind of dormant. Occupy had been a huge disaster for them, and the Young Turks were operating way before that. So the Young Turks, I think at the very least deserved that. They were first. They get credited with being kind of the first platform on YouTube in this kind of arena. I think even when you bring in the right, I think they were first. I'm not sure if I'm entirely correct on that, but regardless, they've been around for a long time. So you got to give them that. And look, I give them a hard time, but this comes down to one fundamental thing, and that is everybody has a right to say whatever they feel like saying, and put out information that they feel and believe is true. It doesn't matter where it's coming from politically, because these tech giants censoring everybody. I'll defend TYT, I'll defend Alex Jones, I'll defend any of them on any side or any spectrum, and say, you know what, these people deserve to enjoy these platforms as we do, because they've become a vital utility for our society, especially in this tech and hyper competitive global business world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you brought up a great point there about a gateway there. They were one of the first ones to do it, and back when they were around in 2016, there weren't as many other lefty channels out there, and they were a gateway for me, and I'm sure now they will also be a gateway for a lot of liberals who are still watching CNN and MSNBC, and they don't like Republicans. People who have liberal values. It'll be a good gateway for those people into understanding more of the realities of our systemic problems. And then once the audience becomes more critically thinking enough, they'll graduate from TYT into other progressive channels, ones that are more underground, and others that are rising up right now. There are some that are in the 100,000s, approaching the 1 million. But TYT right now, as it stands, in terms of lefty political channels, they are the ones that sit at by far the most subscribers.
I just wanted to touch on what you said. That was very important. That people should understand is that, like you said, gradual increase or graduation, right? Like graduating from TYT, going to someone more progressive, or maybe leaning the other way and starting to go somewhat more right wing or somewhat more to the right of things, more libertarian, saying, oh, this maybe isn't for me. All of this works that way, but what's happened is lately we've kind of fallen into the same trap that mainstream media has gotten into. Fox News, it's like we're children watching our parents do something, and then we think we can do it better, but then we fall into the same mistakes that they're doing. You see, mainstream media, what it's done is said, CNN is worse than we are. Don't trust them. They're fake news. No, you're fake news. That has to do a lot with Trump, but it also has a lot to do with us. And we kind of feed that. We feed that because we pay for it. We pay attention to it. So we want to be all critical of this politician or this organization, TYT, and what they do. And they raise money, and how dare they? Yeah. I've been there.
That's
But it's all, we all subscribe, we all put those views in.
that's a funny analogy. Like they're, it's like we're criticizing the parents because they're the ones that influence us, right? And then that's true in a lot of families. It's your parents who influence you in a lot of the ways that you think. And TYT, they're the ones that are criticizing the lefty corporate news, although they don't do it as much as the grandchildren, which I'll get into. TYT bred, the newer channels like you and I, and now we're criticizing them. And the CNN and MSNBC, they're like the grandparent channels. And
Yeah, and let me just finish that thought because it's important. So the mistakes that I think that we're making following TYT's, examples and mainstream medias is that we're playing that same game. We're playing that blame game like they are, like the mainstream media. So now the news is the news in the news, and then that kind of, disseminates down to what this person did and to see what that person said, to the point where now that we're critical of the hosts and the delivery people of what's supposed to be the news of politicians, whatever, now that that's being politicized, all of the news, all of journalism is World Wrestling Federation. It's this WWF entertainment market now. It's not really about dig deep journalism or following a story for years. That stuff, that doesn't get anything. We're in a money world, baby, and that doesn't get me anywhere. So that's why TYT has turned to more news-like, centrist-like, deliveries and advertising, etc. And the Hill, the Rising, those people didn't start in their garage. They're not the Steve Jobs of progressive media. They're washout, burnout, mainstream media people who saw an opportunity in the progressive world and said, I'm going to try and see what I can do there. And the Hill, a corporation that has CBS executives and all kinds of people, they're the delivery for this.
yeah,
Now, Bristol can't step outside that.
and because the Hill and the Young Turks, they have like a nice studio set up, they're an easier pill to swallow when they present, like when they talk about getting money out of politics and other stuff like that. For people who are more used to traditional news, they think that it's more credible to listen to them, since they do have that nice studio, than it is to listen to people who are making videos in their bedroom. Even though more often than not, the people making videos in their bedroom bring more honest analysis, which we'll get into, than the Young Turks. And they also had a lot of power to start programs like Wolfpack and the Justice Democrats, the latter of which has its own pros and cons too. And though many of the Justice Democrat candidates, they don't push the Democratic Party enough, as much as a lot of progressives would wish that they did. They're hardly ever critical of Nancy Pelosi. At least they do give lip service to a lot of progressive policies like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal and increasing minimum wage, which before it wasn't even brought to the table.
Yeah, let me just say this real quick too. TYT was brought up on Obama's administration. Let's remember that. Occupy happened on Obama's watch. A lot of organizing, Black Lives Matter, happened under Obama's watch. Obama was more sympathetic, more empathetic, had the ability to be either or, right, at any moment, rather than a Republican having been in office. You think Mitt Romney would have, caved on some of the things Obama did? People always say the analogy, well, they were both for that ACA, so that was Romney's plan. Okay, that's one specific thing, but Obama did the Iran deal. Obama did a bunch of other things. And I'm not trying to defend any of these people. In fact, I vilify these people personally, but that shouldn't get in the way of me reporting things that they've done accurately. TYT, they raised $20 million, but that's okay, because they see that their new competition, where they need to, their goals are, we want to compete with mainstream media. They don't want to compete with us or people who are in that lower middle range area. They just don't. They've graduated, like you said, to that next level. And it's okay to be critical of those people, and there should be a structure, a body that is critical, does critical analysis of these people. It's just we need to be careful, if we're doing that, not to follow the mistakes of mainstream media and these people like TYT on the Hill, where it becomes a game to them of them versus the other. And now you have all these fan groups for this person or that person. It shouldn't be about that.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
and
want to bring
I
up how they
want
were
to
one
bring
of the first ones
first ones
to start,
are
making news on the internet. So who could they have copied from whenever they would talk about the news? They just looked at, like CNN and MSNBC and how they have like their nice studios and everything. So they felt like they had to mimic that. And now we have people who were more independent, who have, like how I mentioned earlier, they're making videos like in their rooms and stuff, which shows that, these are people who graduated. They realize that, look, we don't need like a fancy studio. But it's just something to keep in mind. Like TYT had no one like that before them, like people who were presenting news in their rooms before they got started. So they had no other, the only ideas they had in mind to mimic was mainstream news. Um,
yep.
so let's get into the cons now. Like this is going to be some juicy stuff here, because like I said earlier, Israel,
Those
you've
were
done a
the
lot of
cons.
yeah, you've done a lot of videos criticizing the Young Turks. So
Yeah.
the first point I'll bring up here is that although they're a good gateway for more liberal leaning people, I don't think that they're a good gateway for more conservative leaning people. And there are some exceptions out there, but a lot of TYT's takes are repellent to conservatives, and they're very tribal in the conservatives versus liberal takes. So, what are your thoughts, Israel?
Well, I think that they're catering to that. They see that there's a demand for this kind of blue versus red with a little bit of nuance and more progressivism to it. And there's an audience for that. I can't blame them. I don't believe in socialism, like full blown socialism. I think that you need capitalism, especially in America, a very competitive country to begin with, because immigrants came in, we competed. Certain immigrants assimilated better, faster, more rapidly, found their markets, found their niches. So I don't believe that this leftist, magic world thing has to go to its extreme, or nor should it. I believe that there are parts of economic policies that the left is slinging that are good, that I support, and I'll back anybody who says them. Medicare for all, those kinds of things. TYT, they still push for those things. Okay? They still want to get the goalposts past that. So they want that for people. So I don't entirely hate them for, capitalizing on this market. They had that fight with the union, but to their credit, they agreed for the representation for the union. So TYT Union got a big victory there, so I gave them credit on that. I followed that story because I thought it was important, because for decades you can't say you're for workers' rights with Amazon and other big conglomerates and pressure them on your network. And then when your network grows big enough and it actually has an influx of money come in from an investor, then turn around and say, no, that's not going to work out here in our shop. You can't do that. You have to lead by example. So, but yeah, it is critical. It is a critique to do that, like to bring that up and say this is something that should be talked about. Why were you so hesitant with the unions? And put pressure on that, and they cave to that pressure. Would a right wing news or radio show or YouTube show cave to that same pressure? No, they don't believe in that stuff. They don't. It's not part of their core. We need to help cultivate that movement, and right wingers too, is because there's a populist right wing movement that's happening that is okay with government spending. They think that in certain parts of it, it's good. If it can help family values, boom, that checks one of the big ones. If it can help, bring more freedom and liberty for people, boom, not having to worry about medical bills, that helps make me freer, make me have freer decisions. Like I don't have to stay at this job forever. So yeah, that's what I would sum it up for TYT. It's nuanced. Everything is nuanced.
Yeah, I just want to add on a little bit more to how they cater a lot to this conservative versus liberal issues. Is that this contributes to many of their Trump derangement syndrome takes. And an example is how they focused way too much on attacking Trump, which is fine if to criticize Trump. Of course, there's a million things you can criticize him on. But when credit is due, like for example, when he was having peace talks with North Korea, they were criticizing him there. and they also didn't acknowledge the DNC fraud lawsuit or the WikiLeaks emails of the DNC corruption nearly as much as they should have. But if it was the Republican Party that was doing that and there was a WikiLeaks about how much they rigged the election, they would be talking about that nonstop. They were also hurting themselves when they kept pushing for a Trump impeachment when it was dead on arrival. I mean, it was a hyper-partisan take that only increased Trump's poll numbers at that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That hurt them, in their viewership, subscriptions. So they saw that, they took on that Russiagate stuff, the impeachment stuff, Trump derangement syndrome. And again, I think it's a calculation they're making. They're saying this is the audience that's growing. This is where the growth is. And you're actually seeing a bounce back from that because of everything that's happening now, especially like COVID, Trump's handling of it. He's bumbling everything. So right now they're riding that high. So they're kind of capturing back, or at least capturing more of a market that they betted on as a group, as a company. They said this is the target audience we're going for. And again, now there's all kinds of middle range YouTube commentators who are leftists who are saturating the market of being critical of TYT and their approach and the turn they're making as a body, and trying to fill the market that they went away from or graduating from, which is, no, I'm more hardcore. I have more, I guess, value. I have more loyalty to my values. What's the thing that people commonly say? Oh, the left has too many standards, high standards, too many,
like purity tests?
High value. What's that?
Like purity tests?
Yes, perfect. That's the one I was looking for. Yeah, that there's a lot of purity tests. So that market is kind of like, I have purity tests. These are my purity tests. That's like Kyle Kalinske and these folks, right? That's where you're getting to. So, and that's all good. And on the right, you have the same thing. I just think we're so caught up in it. It's just like, okay, who cares? Obviously, we've described a gradient here. It's a gradient of information from left to right, middle, libertarian, from this economic perspective, from that. That is what information is. It's from all kinds of perspectives, right? And it's okay to have it out there. So that's why I don't get why the leftists and TYT, that's another critique, is they're too on the side of that AOC mentality and, appease corporate mentality, which is, let's censor like bad behavior and mostly conservative behavior or radical left behavior. We just want to, this kind of authoritarian power that the left is desiring, and too many progressives are falling in on that.
Yeah, and with what you just mentioned, they're sort of in a way acting like corporate news, and they do receive money from billionaires like Jeffrey Katzenberg, which goes against what they were talking about when they were saying that we can't have money in politics. And I thought it was pretty hypocritical of Cheng saying like, oh no, money like this, it's going to corrupt all these politicians and stuff. Oh, but it's not going to corrupt me. It's not going to affect the things that I say. But right. There's no way to prove that it's affecting the way he thinks and stuff. But we have to look at it as like, what is he saying? Was he propping up Hillary Clinton in 2016? Yeah, and the people who donated to his network, TYT, they were people who put a lot of money into Hillary Clinton and other corporate Democrat-like candidates like Barack Obama. And another thing is that they are represented by a talent agency called UTA. This talent agency represents Cenk Uygur, it represents Anna Kasparian, and ironically, it also represents Ben Shapiro. They also represent Chuck Todd, Dana Bash, Don Lemon. So they're kind of acting like corporate news outlets in that sense. And kind of. I have to kind of defend them a little bit here because, I mean, look, clearly they didn't start a co-op. Clearly they are following along with the rules of business. Start a business, have something to capitalize on, incorporate, get investments, raise money, start to have real influence in the system because this system this is how it's run.
And your most radical left person still participates in this system. Whether they say, oh, I'm unwillingly participating in it, you're still participating in it, which still perpetuates that system. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like this analogy of that the left makes a lot of times where they say, or actually where the left defends its politicians by saying, look, Bernie traveled in a private jet plane talking about environmentalist issues, but look, that's the system we have. Bernie's just operating within
Mm-hmm.
the system. We, as hardcore leftists, tree huggers, we understand that, man. It's totally cool. You know, Bernie's trying to get the message across. You know, what's he going to do? Walk all across California like he's Jesus on his bare feet? No. Quit being, nonsensical. Meanwhile, TYT is doing something similar, and the left shreds them for it. You know, and that's something I have to defend is just to say, look, why are you saying that Bernie not having to walk up to espouse an economic green message? That's okay because you got to deal with the sins of the system as it is.
Yeah, I see what you're
But
saying there. We need money in order to fight other people who have money. But what TYT showed us in the 2016 primary is that they're more than capable of crowdfunding. So they need this $20 million from Katzenberg and other $1 million from all these other lobbyists if they're more than capable of crowdfunding with their audience. And I
there's
think that
only
hurt them
so
too,
much you
because
can extract.
when a lot of people started finding out about this funding from these oligarchs that we're supposed to be fighting against, that lost them a lot of subscribers, and we saw a lot of them move over and start becoming Patreons for people like Jimmy Dore and start funding other smaller channels. So maybe if they
Yeah,
stayed more
but
faithful, they could have, I don't know, I'm just theorizing here, maybe they could have garnered even more crowdfunding than they were back in 2016.
it all depends on what their goals are, what the person's goal. Jimmy Dore, his his comedy show, is not to keep up the Jimmy Dore show. Okay, it's profitable on itself because any good YouTuber will tell you need to make a business outside of YouTube to be successful on YouTube because you can't rely on ad revenue. Jimmy knows this. All these people know this. That's why there's some kind of business behind every successful show. And so when Jimmy does this comedy shows, believe me, he's raking in the money. He's taking in as much as
Yeah.
he possibly can from that. Okay? This guy's worth millions of dollars now. But does that mean that, his points aren't valid? Does that mean that he's, anything he says now I can't really listen to because the man collects all kinds of money from his venues? Of course not. I'm going to say, yeah, I think you're right because I'm a human being. I'm capable of acknowledging, hey, you live in a system. You can't really do anything about it because we're all collectively stuck and we all perpetuate it in one way or another. But I get you, brother. I know where you're coming from, Jimmy.
Yeah, and the
I can
difference.
say the same thing about Jank.
Yeah, and the difference there though with Jimmy Dore, like what he does is something that like the Young Turks and the people over at the Hill, like Cristobal and Sagar, what they don't do enough, and that's that Jimmy Dore travels around the country and he talks to a lot of working class people. When he has these live shows, he also goes to a lot of protests, and so he's interacting and he's interacting
If
with
you
working
have
class
money
people,
to
and he's
interact,
able
if
to
you have the money,
yeah,
those
yeah,
tickets are
of course,
free.
yeah, but it's not coming from like these billionaires. So I think I understand TYT where they're coming from. Like this thought that just didn't come across their head. Like this strategy that Jimmy Dore is doing that didn't come across their mind in order to do. And it
And
might
it's
have to do with
because
the
they
way
have
that they were
different
brought up.
roles.
Because like what Jimmy Dore and other people like to say a lot is that these are people who grew up privileged already, who grew up in cul-de-sacs, and so a lot of their perspectives are shaped by like the small bubble that they live in.
And that's the problem though, is like they're looking at it in that way. Like, what's wrong with that? Okay, so a good friend of mine grew up in the cul-de-sac, A good friend of mine runs a pretty decent business. He employs a couple of people. And he goes out and votes and has the ear of many, prominent people in real estate and downtown, prominent people in the schooling industry and education and the colleges. So his connections are wide and deep. So
Yeah.
why am I gonna be on the side of the leftists who go on media and scold these people who arguably make up a pretty big majority of the eventual voter base.
Mm-hmm.
The people who go all the way through that process. Not Lashonda,
Mm-hmm.
not Shaniqua, who's out there on BLM in the streets. Nothing wrong with them. But they just don't go out and vote at the same rate as those suburbanites. So why is the left so invested in isolating and excluding the biggest demographic who go out and vote?
It makes it seem like we're trying to exclude, but what we're doing is trying to open up TYT's eyes and open up other people's eyes to some of the problems and realities that are happening in a lot of poor communities. Over 50% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. And the Young Turks, they don't come from that. And so it's harder for them to understand because they haven't witnessed it firsthand. So we're really just trying to push them, and we're trying to open their eyes. I know some people are more childish in their attacks towards TYT, but we got to remember, these are people who just have not experienced that, and we're just trying to open their eyes. And they can be allies. Like the Young Turks, they can be allies, but we have to, open their eyes. It's like when you're on the field, and if you're playing a sport and there's a teammate who's slacking, you got to tell them, hey, you could have done this better. You're doing great on this, but look, I'm just trying to get you to improve so that we can win this game.
No, I think you're right. I think, look, just to wrap up on this, TYT did a lot of that for Obama's administration. They were very critical, but they were also there to combat against the Republicans. In the critique that you made of TYT, I concur and I agree. But there's also an internal reflective criticism of the left, and everybody skewed further to the TYT left and all the way down to Antifa, which is to say, the critique for you is that you're not realizing the exact point you're making when it comes to people like TYT. Is they were able to say, yeah, the Republicans are not our allies. They might be friends. We could be friends with Republicans. We can work with Republicans, but politically, we're opponents. We're two politically different parties with two politically different ideological platforms that are competing for the people's votes. And when my side wins and benefits, that gives opportunity to everybody in that side. Because now you have a more receptive environment rather than the Republicans. What have you gotten right now? You've gotten federales taking people into vans. You have fights breaking out. You have chaotic anarchists waving flag demonstrations that are leading nowhere. It's been 60 days. There's been no progress on that, nothing. The stimulus checks came faster than some kind of resolution or platform or legislation when it comes to BLM and these anarcho neo-communists out on the streets who want to say that they're our friends and our allies, but Latino communities are suffering because they no longer can go to work. They can no longer get on their ladders and fix roofs. They can no longer get into schools to do their work, as educators, what have you. And Crimea River in Portland, those Portland people are 77% white. It must have been a hell of a mission to try to find, the nearest black person in a 77% Portland community. What I always say is that BLM is Occupy 2.0. They're trying to hide Occupy 2.0 inside of BLM and say, this is BLM, because BLM caught fire. Why? Because it's easy. It's an easy thing to get behind. That's why corporate's behind it. But anyways, I don't want to go on a different rant.
Yeah, we'll debate all about that. I'll just say, like, the corporate Democrats, like, I know that you disagree with me on this when we have these live debates on Fridays, is that they're more on the side of Republicans than they are on the working class people. But that's like a whole other issue, and like the Black Lives Matter stuff. You make some good points there about how it is really focused on social issues, but it has potential there to start giving more economic talking points, which I think needs to be brought in more during these rallies. It's that they're focusing a lot on the social issues, which is fine because they're fighting for They're fighting for Black lives, but we also have to look at the systematics here and talk about how the economics is a big factor in this. Um, but yeah, the last thing, and I know you will agree with me on here for a con, is that they were instrumental in dividing the left during the primaries because they kept demonizing other outsider candidates like Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang. They fell for a lot of mainstream media smears towards Tulsi Gabbard, and it was really unfortunate that they couldn't garner a bigger alliance by coalescing with Tulsi supporters because she's an outsider candidate. She's fighting to get money out of politics, but they had so many blinders on because of their unrecognized bias towards Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, right?
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. Look, there's barely any bigger Tulsi supporters out there than me. I've really backed Tulsi Gabbard, and I agree with her on her strategy because she has that patriotism thing. God, this is the biggest. Imagine if you replace the anarchist flags with American flags. The perception on the polling and the numbers coming back from those, nighttime rallies would be massive. People would be more supportive if they saw American, because nobody wants to see an anarchist flag. But to your point, yeah, I agree. It's just, look, even being a Tulsi supporter, I still have to give TYT. Look, it wasn't just them. It was Michael Brooks. It was the Humanist Report.
Yeah, people who are influenced.
Large majority.
Yeah.
Even if they are TYT affiliates, they don't all think alike. So this was just kind of a huge group think on a big majority of the left. Because even in the chat rooms and in the far, realms of Reddit and other places, the message was clear. Tulsi Gabbard is some kind of Trojan horse Republican. So it wasn't just TYT's narrative. It was shaping that opposition to Tulsi. It was also an underbelly of Antifa and these types of characters, these small fringes in the left, who I know we're building up as this thing here in this conversation, but I just use them as the extremists because, that's... Anyways, they also formed a narrative against Tulsi Gabbard as well. So it wasn't just TYT that was pushing back against Tulsi. So I can't blame TYT for, they hold a big responsibility.
Oh no, I'm just bringing up like one con. I don't know if they were the ones who started it. They might have been, but they definitely were one of the many people who were doing that. I'm just saying it as that's one of the critiques here.
For sure. And it's a critique because I think, it's a broader critique because look, everyone's going to disagree. Oh, TYT didn't say exactly what I want to hear, so I'm done with TYT. No, of course not, right? They can say, ooh, Tulsi bad, and I'm a Tulsi supporter. I got to be a big boy and say, yeah, okay, you say Tulsi's bad, that's fine. She's not. I know she's not. Here's some evidence, right? Boom, put it out there, blog about it, tweet about it, maybe make a YouTube video about it. That's how you do it.
Yeah, they wouldn't listen though.
I don't try to get Jank shut down or canceled because they said this or that. I disagree with you, dude. You're wrong. Here's why. Whatever. Put out whatever information you want. There's plenty of information out there that rebutes it. But the larger critique is, that they have a big platform and they shape a narrative on the left. And oftentimes they get it wrong. So oftentimes you see the shifts horribly, sway down towards the wrong path that you wish wouldn't have happened. But because TYT has such a dominant presence on the left, it's going to happen. And, it's unfortunate. But that could be said about many other people too. Kyle.
Yeah, it's not mutually exclusive. Like this is just like an example of another con here. And they're not the only ones that did this. Just like they're not the only news outlet that takes corporate money. There's also The Hill, and there's like The Intercept, who also takes in corporate money.
Pretty much every right wing, Turning Point USA, the Daily Wire, all of those.
Yeah. Which is also, I wanted to hear from you what you think about how, Ben Shapiro and Cenk are represented by the same guy, yet they were debating each other back. I think it was 2017, was it?
Yeah, it's good money. It's good money to have these two different personalities being represented as an ad agent because you get to do those kind of, Tyson-esque fights and get promotion out of it and get them on Politicon and get them on different venues prepping for this event. Money. I'm happy. The people I represent are happy. Cenk's happy. Ben's happy, and they get to go out and push the narratives that they want, all while both being part of this kind of elitist class of people who make their rounds. That could be the interpretation by a leftist guy, right? Ah, fuck this guy then now, or screw this guy. Sorry, but someone like me, I just look at it and I say, yeah, I mean, what they're in, this is their career, this is the business that they're in. If they were accountants or basketball players, of course they would sign with an agency, even though that agency represented the Trailblazers and also the Dallas Mavericks. Doesn't matter. It's that doesn't matter in sports like that. So why should it matter in politics? Politics has become a wrestling sport. This is like WWE wrestling sport. This is what we're all part of. So enjoy it.
Yeah, I want to know what the audience thinks. Let us know in the comment section. Do you think TYT should continue down this path of operating with this capitalist system, though they're claiming to be fighting against it? What are your thoughts? Let us know. And closing off here, me and Israel are going to talk about the ugly now. We talked about the good, we talked about the bad. Now let's talk about the ugly, which is the future. Will TYT be effective at leading us towards progressivism in the future, or are they going to create more division within the country? What do you think, Israel?
I think that they'll be more of a positive impact, because once Biden gets in, I think that they will turn on Biden in the sense that they'll go back to the same script when Obama was in office, is push back against the administration when they make mistakes, which they'll make a lot of mistakes. So I think that they'll be good in that sense. They'll allow more of a breathing room on the left, because I'm telling you, the environment will be different. You can already envision it, man. TYT starts criticizing Biden and Obama, or Biden and whoever, Kamala looks like. And so now they get back in the good graces of the comrades and all those people, right? So, and then everybody else gets to benefit and flourish from that, because, it's not going to be a Trump environment. It's not going to be whenever I say environment, it means like whenever Trump's in the room, he sucks all the air out of the room. That's the kind of force that Trump is. It doesn't matter if it's in mainstream media circles, if it's in the water cooler circles at your office. It's going to be Trump. That's going to be the conversation. So when you have someone like Biden in there, the issues can be talked about a little bit more and without risking the entire air to be sucked out of the room. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, even if it's a small amount that stays in the room, you still have something to freaking mine from, some attention to mine from towards your issues. A Green New Deal, what is it? That Rise movement, the Sunrise movement. Greta Van, whatever her little, like the young girl's name is. Right. So that's what I'm saying, is that environment will be more receptive to that. So, you can get some incremental stuff. And by the way, who says that government has to be a company where it pops out efficient, fascist legislation once the fascists get in power easily? Because apparently, according to everybody who argues this, the government should run like a damn business, like efficient. No, there's a reason we have checks and balances, people. We hate the bureaucracy, but we should be grateful for the bureaucracy sometimes too, because it allows the minority to push back a little bit, and we gradually proceed because there are checks and balances that are there, and that's for a reason, and that's why we've lasted as long as we've lasted. So I don't buy into this idea that it has to be all progressives. All the House representatives need to be progressives. The agenda needs to be passed. It needs to be progressive. The Republicans need to get in line. Okay, everybody got in line. Now we're in a progressive world. Oh, the fascists took over because too much progressivism. So now we're in a fascist world. Mussolini type of character. He's going to pass everything. No, that would be a horrible system if it worked that efficiently. There's a reason why it doesn't work as efficiently as the business community does. We're just used to it, and we want that from it because guess what? We live in that system, so we're influenced by it. Even your more comrade, Maoist, communist kid who lives in his mom's basement, his thinking of Maoism, it's going to be rooted in a capitalist system because he grew up and was raised in it. So no matter what, it's going to have some elements of that. And you're never going to get rid of that because that's America, baby. That's how we are.
I think we're still gonna keep seeing what we're seeing right now, and I don't. I think you've also noticed this, Israel, is that their subscriber count has stayed stagnant. Like at one point they were at 5 million, but then they dropped. They lost a couple of subscribers. Now they're at like 4.8 or 4.9 million subscribers, and that the reason why I see it as stagnant is because I think they are converting some people. You know, the people who are still watching CNN and MSNBC, they find TYT and then they get converted and they start realizing a lot of the systemic issues of this country. But then we have people who graduate who are following TYT a little longer and became more critical thinkers, and then they move on to other channels, which is why these other channels really have a place here. They're very necessary to, you know, to keep TYT in check, to talk about a lot of stuff that TYT doesn't talk about. I think that they're going to continue to, you know, talk about, you know, left versus right issues, like conservative versus liberal issues, while not focusing enough on the thing that unites us all, which some of these other channels talk about. You know, working class people, there's conservatives and there's liberals, and there's a lot of stuff that we'll all agree on. Whereas TYT, you know, they're focusing a lot on the social issues that divide us. So I think we'll continue to see that conversion. I think that some people, we talked about this last time when we talked about the Hill. I think that there is a chance that as the Hill's platform grows, we might see some decrease in TYT's numbers. Do you think that that's true?
No, I think that they're catering to two different audiences. I think the Hill the Rising is more capable of appealing to more radical ends of the spectrum. Michael Brooks, for all intents and purposes, was pretty far left for America. I mean, he was pretty out there, more so than Bernie was. I mean, I would consider him like he was pretty extreme. And when he passed, Crystal Ball said, you know, my comrade, Michael Brooks. You don't just say that, okay? You don't just say that on a program like that with that big of an audience. So she's trying to cater to a certain perspective on the left, which is more comrade-ish, more, you know, pro-red, pro-Maoist, in my opinion, radical left, you know, loony left. But that's fine. You go ahead, make your money, be hypocritical. I don't care. Your audience might care, you know. They might say, hey, why aren't you being, you know, true to your values? And, you know, and with TYT, I am of the belief that they'll lean more economic, honestly, because we'll go into an administration with Biden who's more sympathetic to the left, and the economy has to recover, right? So when Biden gets in there, everybody knows that he's going to have to do something. And so now you have all these progressive people who are elected magically, right? Fiorella magically, you know, because Fiorella from Combo Couch, not to call her out, she's a good person, does good stuff. But people like her, I hear constantly talk about like the election's always rigged, the DNC doesn't want blah, blah, blah. Okay, Cori Bush, how did all these people start magically coming up, you know? They're good orators, they are good communicators, and they have the backing of progressive people. And then they get elected like magic, right? I'm not dismissing any electoral.
Like when we overwhelm the electoral process system, that can happen. But we still, I think it's still necessary to be on the ground and call out election rigging, because it does happen. But we have to at the same time still prop up, you know, down ballot candidates who are proposing policies that are for progressivism or for working class people.
And be happy when they get elected. Like these people are going to go to Congress, and you know, some people are so pessimistic. They're like, oh, they're just going to turn into AOC. They're going to get some PAC.
Well, then
like
just call them out followers. On it. Like if they do become like AOC, and I saw like Jamal Bauman talking about how he's against BDS. You just call them out on it. You know, just call them out, hold their feet to the fire, and then push them to hold more progressive values. And if they don't, then try to prop up another candidate who's better than them.
You got to show them. Eventually, look, we're these, and I do got to go, but I will say this thing.
Yeah.
The one thing that, you know, will hurt these people the most, okay? If you don't like them, the one thing that will hurt them the most is when you take their voters away from them. When you start chipping away at their polling, look at Trump. He's melting. He's falling apart before our eyes. Me, as a Trump sympathizer, someone who's actually likes a lot of his protectionist stuff, reopen the economy, all that. He's losing it because the smallest chip that they took away from his numbers, his popularity, his polling, a lot of it due to him, not really credited to Biden, but still, you see the reaction that these people have. They lose it. They lose it. So every politician is exactly like that. You chip away a little bit at their constituents and you actually take away from their voting block, and you'll see how fast they start mimicking you or trying to, and you might say, oh, but that's fake. That's fake. That's not real. I don't care about it because the person's just pandering. Yeah, they're reacting in a pandering way because of your action. Your action caused that, which was progress. You're progressing that person to come towards you, even if it's just in show at first. 36 voted for the DNC reform for Medicare for All, right? To put it on the agenda. In 2016, 0, because they wouldn't even allow it for a vote. So I see all these progressive commentators putting that out on YouTube. Oh my God, the DNC isn't worth saving. Only 36 people backed our Medicare for All. That's right. Praise them. Praise those 36 people. Say, we're going to be there for you next time. That a boy or that a girl.
For those 36 people, though. But the thing about it, though, is that they did that because they're afraid. They think that we're not going to vote for them. So that's the thing. Like, if they're not for these progressive policies and they're not offering it for them, if we vote for them, then we give up leverage because then they're like, oh, we don't have to do it. We don't even have to pander for them.
You didn't have any leverage to begin with. And whatever leverage you did have, it was used and you got 36 people. Whereas before you had none. So it just shows that works. And they're going to come in. You said they're scared
because they saw that Crowley and other people lost and they got replaced by more progressive people. So a lot of them are afraid of that.
Because they came out to vote. Those progressive people came out to vote and they had a good candidate behind them. So you do more and more of that. And eventually you'll outnumber the people who, the establishment. You'll start outnumbering them to the point where even the ones that remain will be more progressive just by the very nature of them being outnumbered and not wanting to lose their seat in Congress. I mean, you have Mitch McConnell, who's on the brink of losing his seat. He's tied in his race. The liberals are doing something that the progressives are scoffing at. Look at what they're doing. This is the strategy that they've learned from decades of harnessing the power they gained during the Clinton years and triangulation. Learn from that. Don't be naive. Grow up and learn from how politics is played so you can start moving the needle towards your direction, which is already happening. It's just a lot of people are just so caught up in the drama of it.
Yeah, well, the only thing I'll say to that is that a lot of those people who were in there for decades were, some of them, I think some of them are waking up and they're trying to be more for progressive values. Like, there are some candidates that are no longer taking corporate money. But the ones that are still taking in corporate money, that haven't awoken from all this and who are happy with the system, they're still in it to, satisfy their donors. So I'll leave the viewers with this final message about how to get more involved by, informing yourself about down ballot candidates. Look at who is, look at who's running locally, and prop up the candidates that are for a lot of these progressive policies like Medicare for All, and hold their feet to the fire even when they get into office. We were talking about how TYT is like a converter type of channel. I think that other channels like mine and like Israel's and like we brought up Jimmy Dore, also we brought up the Convo Couch and the MCSC network. Those channels also serve as converting people. Whether they convert more critically thinking individuals, that's like another topic, but there's conversion happening regardless. It's just that what we were mentioning is that TYT is able to convert the people who identify themselves more as like liberals, right, Israel, like who tune into a lot of like CNN and MSNBC. So
and that's the growing majority right now that are, paying more attention to politics. So it makes sense strategically as a business decision too.
Yeah, but you guys also have the power to convert people. So let your friends know about the things that you learned from me and Israel's channel and from all these other progressive channels that you guys listen to. And with that, I'll thank you, Israel, so much for coming on. We had a great discussion and exchange of differences and opinions here. It's always great to have those conversations. So thanks again for coming on, and thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Frank Analysis, and subscribe over to Big Talk, Little Talk, and don't forget to stay informed. Thanks for watching that segment of Hear Me Out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you can get the latest on sports, pop culture, and progressive politics. Stay informed.